you've ever wished that you could assemble things just as fast as the Flash, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're planning to remove the heads like I am, you're going to need to drain your coolant. When dropping the coolant on a vehicle, be sure to undo your radiator cap so that there's no resistance on the flow of your coolant. Look at that. Generally with a drain cock, you can twist it in a clockwise orientation until the liquid starts coming out. Mine appears to be broken or stripped, so unfortunately for me, I'm going to have to undo the lower radiator hose. I'm going to have to undo the clamp all the way down there. Now with the fans unplugged, you're going to use a 10mm socket to loosen a bolt on each side. There's one right here and another one right here. Now that my lower radiator hose clamp is loosened, I'm ready to make a big mess. Now that my coolant is drained, I'm going to go ahead and remove the upper radiator hose clamp. I'm going to go ahead and remove the upper radiator hose from the radiator itself in order to provide more space to address the bolts for the top timing cover. first 2 bolts are longer, and then the back 6 are shorter bolts. Now we can pull the fuel rails out, pull the injectors out, and get them out of the way. Now using an 8mm socket, I'm going to go ahead and remove 8 bolts that are self-retained into the valve cover on each side to get both valve covers off. Now go ahead and remove your valve covers. If you're dealing with timing on a V6 Dodge from 06 to 2010, you'll want to first put the engine in top dead center. If you're not sure what top dead center is, that's when your piston on cylinder number 1 is all the way at the end of its stroke, right before it starts heading down the cylinder as the crank turns the rod over. For this 2008 Dodge Charger that I'm working on, Dodge was kind to us and gave us timing marks. So if you see this mark on the top of the case right there, it's about lined up with the cam gear mark. And same for this cam gear on the other side, the passenger side. Those are both lined up. And then you have a third spot down to the right of the crankshaft gear. You'll see another gear, and right above it is a cast TDC mark with an arrow that needs to line up with the mark on that gear. This stands for top dead center. If all 3 of these marks are lined up, you know that your V6 engine has good timing. Making sure you put your timing back together correctly is extremely important, especially on interference engines. That way, when the valves complete their stroke and the piston completes its stroke, there's no contact and you won't have catastrophic failure inside your engine. If your headers are going to be coming out of the vehicle, whether you're removing them by themselves or taking them out with the heads, you got to be sure to undo the clip for your upper O2 sensor. Don't forget that. To disconnect your catalytic converter pipe from your headers, there's 2 nuts that will take off this heat shield, and then you need to undo 2 more nuts on each, one on each side behind the heat shield in order to disconnect it. You can use a 5/8 socket or a 16mm socket. This is the heat shield I was talking about. You'll remove 1 nut on each side that was holding the heat shield on, and then 1 nut on each side that's holding the catalytic converter pipe to the header. Using an 18mm socket, you want to loosen each cam gear bolt before you undo the tensioner. Now, to undo your timing belt tensioner, you're going to use a 13mm socket on these 2 bolts right there and right there. And the location of this is on the passenger side of your oil pan. Now that you've taken the tension off of your timing belt and got it out of the way of your water pump, you can take a 10mm socket and remove the 12 bolts surrounding the water pump. Using a 13mm socket, I'm going to remove the 3 bolts on my passenger side that go through the timing back cover into the head. On the back of your passenger side head, you're going to push this red clip right here to the side and remove that plug from the top of that solenoid. When you're reassembling your timing, don't forget that the driver's side cam bank has this extra piece on the back of it. That's apparently bent. I need to straighten that. After removing your timing gear, after removing the cam gear, you're going to want to be sure to not forget this bolt in the bottom right hand corner. It's a 15mm socket. When you go to loosen the head bolts on the heads, you want to be very careful and loosen each bolt about 15 degrees at a time, and then go through and do each bolt another 15 degrees in order to prevent putting too much pressure on one bolt and snapping it off. You do not want to have that problem. In order to get these two head bolts out, you're going to need to remove these rocker arm bolts. Now, I wouldn't remove all four of these at the same time. I would remove these two and get this bolt out. The reason it's held in there is due to the retained washer hitting the bolt head right there. Poor design, Chrysler. Poor design. To get the two bolts on the right side of your tensioner shield out, you're going to use a T40 star head. And if you haven't seen one before, in case you didn't know, screwdriver attachments such as this T40 star head can fit in a 1/4 inch socket. In certain situations, it becomes really valuable. Now that you've taken the tension off of your timing belt and got it out of the way of your water pump, you can take a 10mm socket and remove the 12 bolts surrounding the water pump. Now, to get to the bottom bolts on your water pump, go ahead and use a ratchet to clear the tensioner shield. If you're having a difficult time breaking the seal on your water pump, wedge a hammer gently in between the top of the case and the top of the water pump and pry, and it should come right off. Before you do this, make absolutely sure that you have 6 long bolts out and 5 short bolts. If you're missing one of these 11 bolts, don't pry on that. Alright guys, from the front down, you're going to want to remove the top bolt closest to the outside on your AC compressor. Using a 15mm ratchet, loosen the top bolt of your alternator just so that you can move this bracket out of the way enough to get that bolt out so that you can remove your head. That bolt just retains your dipstick. Now that you've taken the 6 long bolts out of the water pump, removed the top bolt out of your AC compressor, and taken the 1 bolt out of the bracket for the alternator, you should be able to move your timing cover forward enough to buy you the correct angle to remove your driver head. With enough determination, grit, and sheer stupidity, I can do anything. If you're ever having trouble applying enough applying enough pressure with wrenches, you can interlock them like so, and that will give you added leverage. For the passenger side head, don't forget to remove that bolt like I did, or else it's going to really screw up your pull-out method. And that's how you remove heads from your car if it's a 3.5 liter Dodge Charger. There's a learning curve.